Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to this month's edition of our OpenAir webinar series. Appreciate everyone joining today. Today we're going to tackle the topic of skill profiles and some scheduling techniques using skill profiles and how those best practices around those. My name is Ron Bro, I'm the President and CEO of TopStep. Thank everyone again. So agenda today, we'll talk about skill profiles, some tips for maintaining them, how do those get used, and how do we get those into a good process? Those are kind of what we're going to cover. So why use profiles? So when we talk to customers, when they say we really need to be able to identify available resources, but just not available resources, but available resources that meet certain criteria. And we're currently we're tracking that in a spreadsheet. When I hear that, they are a good candidate for using OpenAir's profiles. So the OpenAir profile function does allow you to kind of pre-build a set of skills and profiles, and then assign those and identify those against employees and or contractors, basically any users in the system. And it can assist in being able to find the right resource, as well as some limited career path planning. So it's really good for large organizations, global organizations, especially where resources are shared and not everyone is knows what everyone else does or can or can't do. And so those are kind of the really good use cases for when this is a good. I mentioned skills throughout, but skills is used in a very generic sense. Skills is not necessarily what's required to use this. We've seen lots of different ways this is used. Like, for example, we've seen passport or visa expiration. We've seen certifications tracked, travel preferences tracked. So it couldn't be a list of skills in a traditional sense, but it can also just be a list of business things that are important to the business, that are important when you're selecting a resource to see if they're a good fit for a project. So again, some of the areas where we see this typically used is, product experience is probably the most common. What software packages, what products do people have experience with? Industry, if you're serving multiple industries with your customers and your offerings, you may want to be able to show me all the folks that have healthcare experience versus warehouse experience. Job role, there's job codes, and then you can create job roles in the skill profile. And the benefit of the job role is a person can have multiple job roles in their profile. So they could be a project manager and they could be a tester, for example, and they could rate themselves. We'll talk about the rating process, but that's another good use case for job roles. We caution around soft skills. Soft skills are kind of become a very subjective measurement. So, am I a good presenter? Am I a good writer? Those are skills you may want to search for, but those also may not always be accurate because there is could be some discrepancies in how you measure those on a consistent basis. Languages is another good one. If you are a global organization and you want to be able to track which resources can speak which language and at what level they can speak it, that could be a really good use case as you're looking for resources for international products. Database product experience, software product experience, hardware product experience, these are really good categories, and they also can be broken down further into more minute categorizations. Some things to avoid that we've seen customers think was a good plan, but unfortunately it didn't work out. If you are trying to track product versions, version 1, et cetera, it'd be like the equivalent of saying, okay, I'm good at OpenAir 1.0 UI, but I'm not good at OpenAir 4.0 UI. It's like, it's difficult to, keep that up to date, keep that real time, and also at the end of the day, if I'm looking for someone with OpenAir skills, that generally is not a gating issue with the UI. So it's something we see becomes unmaintainable. And then if the product changes quite a bit, it can become very challenging. A lot of companies, when we're defining, whether this is a good, a good function for them, we start to list, so what are the things you track? And I start to hear a lot of things. I'm like, are you really using that data to determine if someone is a good fit? And if the answer is no, it's like, try to keep this simple as much as you can. And really, we want those key or critical items that are in the list versus just being able to add things just because, Microsoft Microsoft, Word or Excel, do you really look for resources that need that, or is that just something that everyone has some level of capability within? We want to limit tracking profile items that are expected of every day. And again, that gets into presentation skills, soft skills, generic technical skills, like as I mentioned. Those can be, a challenge to maintain. And at the end of the day, the effort to do so doesn't necessarily give you any value of the system. So what are some of the good items that we mentioned? I think I went the wrong. Nope, good here. Product experience, industry experience, languages, location. We see a lot of it. Again, this is more around international companies, and you just have to really define those. Sometimes those are really belonging to an office more so than a location. There are a lot of locations around the world, so you have to kind of define what is a reasonable list of locations and what could benefit the business. So setting it up in regions, for example, maybe states, if that's something that is important to your business, but you want to definitely have a finite list there. And then obviously technical skills, programming languages, database, operating systems. These are probably some of the more common items for tracking. Expertise for items can be, so this is really where you get into the ratings using attribute sets. And so here you can define an attribute set, then you can define what profile items does that attribute set apply to. And you can have varying attribute sets for different types of profiles. So you may have like an expert, beginner, intermediate that would be a good tracker for software skills or programming skills. But that wouldn't be a good tracker maybe for language skills or I'm willing to travel type of thing. So you can have different attributes for different resources, or you can have no attributes. Some skill tracking doesn't require an attribute. It's a yes or no question. Either I have it or I don't have it. I'm either willing to travel or I'm not. There's no kind of in between gray area that needs to be tracked. So I'm going to jump into OpenAir real quick and show a couple of quick things. 1 second. So let's go to the setup of these items we've been talking about. I'm going to jump into administration and jump into the resource settings. And then under here, we have our resource profile. So this is really the place where you go in and you really just define what you are looking to track. So out of the box, OpenAir comes with some resources, and you can go in and you can rename those or decide that they're not valid, so you're not going to use them. There also are custom profile categorizations you can create. You can see here there's an additional 35 in addition to the 5 that come out, so that's 40 groupings. 40 groupings would be a lot of maintenance, so we definitely recommend customers really think about how to organize the different profile items into as few a number of groups that make sense. Within each of these groupings and profile items, you can assign an attribute. So here we have several different attributes that we can choose from, and we'll show what an attribute looks like in a minute, or we can have no attribute. So there's no categorization required. You can also have restricted profiles. So you may want to limit some profiles access by some resources. So think of them as private profiles, and that's defined, access to those is defined in the role of the user that's logged in. So you can define whether they have access to those. And I've seen this where managers have their own grading of their resources that they don't want to share with the actual resources themselves. One other note, if you're adding new values, let's say you want to add a new values to your product or your tech skills, and you want to alert resources that there's a new value for them, you can check this box over here to the right, and then when you add a new resource value, it will send an alert to everyone who has that categorization on their profile that there's a new category available in their selection process. If we take a look at attribute sets real quick. So here we have our different ones. For example, for language, we've got a different set than we would for expertise. We've got native, fluent, conversational, elementary, and then we may have we'll have different sets for more technical skills. So this is very common to have different attributes that can apply to different profiles. You'll notice here, you'll see job role, industry, product knowledge, tech skills. So these are the same categories that were checked in the profiles. And this is what, once you check that box, and this enables it here in this resource settings. And then in here, you can go in and manage, what are the values within that grouping that are available to be selected by the resource. So like I said, each category has different values that resources can pick from. Okay, let's jump back into the presentation. So we talked about subjective attributes. We want to stay away from that, but you can use, like I mentioned earlier, the language-based ones, conversational or tech skills. We want to stay away from subjective as much as we can. One of the things you also came out in one of the recent releases is the ability for profiles to be approved. So I create a profile, and then I can submit it. My manager can then review it and approve it. And so that could be a way of putting some boundaries around the profile setup. And then we talked about the private or the restricted profile items, which if you don't see it, it is a switch, and it is also defined at the role level. So number one fall down we see is everyone thinks this is a great idea, and they set this up, and they have all their resources go in and create their profiles, and everyone's happy, and then it's out of date, and no one is managing to make sure that the data stays fresh and stays correct. And that's the number one basically killer of this feature is the maintenance of it. There takes some effort, some ownership that needs to happen. Unfortunately, there's no automatic reminders like in a timesheet or expense module. So what we've done for some customers that are using this is we have built a script that can send out a reminder if the profile hasn't been updated in a certain period of time. So maybe if within a month, if no one has updated their profile, you can send a friendly message to them as well to do that. You can also run reports and see when a particular category was last updated. You can use within the advanced reports, there is a resource profile report. and this will show the last update. So you can use that to monitor who's been updating their profile and who hasn't updated in a while. So keeping folks engaged, keeping them maintaining is a key, key thing you got to think about when you're defining whether you're going to be able to benefit from this feature. We've seen customers where they will use this as a quarterly performance review and a good time to review the profile with the employees, or an annual review. Those are good times to pull up the profile, revisit it, make sure it looks correct, and have it updated if it needs to be updated. You can use anything where you're using certificates with a current or expired. I've seen customers do that where they want to track certifications, and then they want to be able to use an attribute set of current or expired. Those are going to have to be managed quite closely because you don't have dates capable in there, so someone's going to have to check on those and update those as those dates pass. In the quick search, we'll talk about some of the searches. You can quickly, grab a category of profiles and quickly look and change those or update those if you're using like an expired or for certification. So the quick search is a nice way to be able to see the data and update it. So speaking of searches, there are three main ways to search and use the skill search. There are in the resource module, you've got three options. The resource demand request is a feature that also uses the profile, and then you've got the resource planner. So we'll drill into each one of these options. Within the resource module, you've got quick search, you've got a custom search, and then the advanced resource search. And the advanced resource search is a newer search. This came out not too long ago, and it's very similar to the resource demand request from a searching perspective. It's the one that continually gets updated through releases, and it seems to be the path that OpenAir is doubling down on moving forward. And so we typically point customers to that search. And let me show you what that looks like real quick. So when I come into my resource module, I've got my different search capabilities. Here I can come into my advanced search. So here, the benefit here, I can come in, first I could save the search, or I can call for a search that I've used in the past. I want to search regular, and you'll see it starts to count the number of folks that meet the criteria. So you can search cost data as well if you're looking to use a cost as a differentiator for your resource. Availability, so if I'm looking for someone, let's say starting April 1st through May, and I can come in here and set it based on a percentage, let's say 50%, or based on the number of hours. You can use booking types as part of this. You can also use entity tags to limit the search to only folks who need a certain entity tag. You'll note my 27 dropped to 6 when I added my dates in and my availability. So I've dropped down to 6 resources. If I want to see those 6 resources, I can go ahead and search. It'll pull up the folks that match my criteria. But I want to drill down even further. So here I can go into this tab, skills and experience, and here I can come in and I can add from the different categorizations. So let's say, for example, I want to find someone with PSA, and that's a required field. It's brought me down to 1 resource. So you can use this as to limit, to start to say, is it required, or do I need, do I really need an expert? Can I get by with intermediate if you pick a category with its attribute? So it's really nice way to be able to toggle the information and come up with a good list of resources that meet your needs. As we mentioned, quick search, just a single search. You pick a category, pick an attribute set if necessary, and it'll give you everyone who has that on their user record in their profile. So quick way to be able to just not are they available or are they not available. It's just do they have this skill set or not. Custom search does allow you to mix and match the profiles and use availability as well. It's similar to what you see in the advanced search, but it's not quite as robust. So we see customers using more of the advanced search than this custom search. And the advanced search we just looked at, it gives you the query match for users, and also be able to, it also shows you utilization availability too, which is nice in the output of the views. Compare view, another feature that's a couple years old. This is kind of a cool feature. It allows you, if you're trying to select between a few different resources and you need to compare them against each other, we can use this to compare those. So if I go back in, so let's say I want to compare Abby and Ann. I could come in here and say view and compare. And here I can compare them based on their information they have. Ann doesn't have PSA, Abby does. Availability. And then there's a mix of, here's some of the skill profile information as well. So a very nice way I can come in here, I can add additional resources, looking at the dates to show availability. If I were to change the dates, it could get more resources could be available for me to add to this view. So a nice view, a nice way to be able to see. And you can get to this view in almost every page in OpenAir using this little icon here that you can just drill down and take a quick view of who was last in the view or manipulate the view. Resource planner, so you can actually add skills, profile items into the resource planner and use those for being able to filter. So that's a nice, potentially could be a nice way to be able to limit resources and view availability all in one view as well. So here you can see an example of adding a software industry to the view and being able to quickly see who has what skills. Resource demand requests. This one is an interesting feature. It's really built for very complex resource processes where you're not just needing a project manager, but you need a project manager and he needs to have certain skills and speak a certain language and and so forth. So for bigger, larger organizations where they want to be able to say, for this project, I'm going to need 5 developers with these skill sets, 6 PMs, 7 testers. You can basically go in and create a bundled request for resources. And within that, you select from the profiles what types of profile attributes are important. And are they required? Are they optional? What attribute level is needed? So it heavily uses the profile feature in combination with requesting resources and combines the two and allows a PM to basically go in and very tailor select their team for a project that would then go to a set of resource managers. One note, if you're looking at this feature, it does require bookings approvals as well. So you have to have booking approvals in conjunction with the resource demand request. It creates a queue of needs, again, using the profile elements and then allowing the resourcers to go in and you can actually do autofill. So autofill the resource queues and also go in and do searches and be able to see optional folks and select those. So again, really nice functionality, but with a very specific audience. Lastly, reporting is available. I mentioned earlier there's an advanced report that you can filter by different resource types if you want, or just run it for everybody. It'll show you which resources have which profile and what profile type. And again, you can display last updated in the report, so you can see if the people are updating their profile on a regular basis. Also, summary reports do show some of this information as well. It's a little messy because you get a lot of repeating rows for multiple values. So it's generally, we say if you're going to use a summary report, you want to limit it by the profile types in a user report. That way it's a little cleaner, but it is available for summary reports as well. Lastly, we've seen that users create generics and put a scope profile associated with a generic. I've seen this where maybe a contractor doesn't have an OpenAir license and they want to be able to include them in searches without having them be a user. So you can create that contractor generic record and then create a profile for them, and then have them show up if you're doing searching. So that's a business case for using a generic and being able to include them in the search capabilities. So in summary, make sure if you're using the profiles or considering using the profiles, they really support the business needs. Keep it simple. We only want the minimum information, critical information that often is requested by the business. If it doesn't apply, if it doesn't really factor into whether a resource is a good fit or not, it really should not be part of the profile. We need to regularly review resource profiles, approve changes if that's something you're interested in, but the data's got to be good or it will be abandoned by the business. And the business really needs to rely on the data for this feature to become really useful, and that's important. So again, I thank everyone for joining today. Appreciate everyone's loyalty to TopStep. You're welcome to visit our website. We have lots of these webinars out there. We also do tweets, and we have a LinkedIn OpenAir user group if you're interested. So again, appreciate everyone's